Today in episode 36 of the podcast, we'll be discussing an update on Ahsoka Season 2, and Josh Brolin continues to collect big roles like Infinity Stones. We'll also break down the 4th episode of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, and review the movie Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and welcome to We'll Bring the Popcorn.
So our first story this week comes from DC. Now, we've been hearing rumors about them reviving the Green Lantern series finally, and it looks like we got some contenders for, the person that's, potentially going to be the next, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan in this case. And it's a pretty impressive list of candidates. You've got Josh Brolin, who a lot of people appear to be, the front runner for that role, which is crazy because he's doing everything in superhero roles at this point. He's hero, villain, you name it, he's done it. Anti-heroes, he's just kind of running the gauntlet at this point. But you also got Ewan McGregor and Matthew McConaughey, who are also potentially the final 3, depending on what report you're looking at, to play this role. But it's gonna be interesting to see if Josh Brolin actually takes this role on, because obviously with the Ryan Reynolds version of Green Lantern, it's left kind of a bad taste in a lot of fans' mouths, and it looks like they're going back to that well potentially.
So if Brolin accepts, does that mean Deadpool 2 is a Green Lantern movie now?
It just might be. It might have to actually be now.
Which is also funny because he goes back and, the bonus scene at the very end of Deadpool 2 where he's using Cable's time traveling to go back to stop Ryan Reynolds from reading the Green Lantern script will make, be even funnier now because
it's very meta.
Potentially. But it's interesting to see that Brolin and Ewan and Matthew McConaughey are all the front runners because they are much older guys in their 50s plus here that, that means they're going for an older Hal Jordan that, probably more established, not going to be an origin story. Maybe he's going to be more of a side character and not be the main Lantern we're following because, we have a bunch of different Lanterns that we can go with and a lot of different stories. So, but that was interesting to me to see that they're going with a group of much older actors for this role, because you thought, especially since they've barely established Green Lantern in live action, because it's only been the Ryan Reynolds movie, other than, the Snyder Cut had one in there, but, stuff in the full regular, out there. We haven't had a real established Lantern scene, and they're going with an older Hal Jordan. I'm curious to see how that series plays out.
Yeah, I mean, the origin stories are kind of, I don't want to say they're necessarily played out, but I kind of like when they just jump into, okay, we already know, this character is going to be, this hero. We don't have to see how they got their powers necessarily, which is kind of why I'm really looking forward to the Fantastic Four. I know we're completely switching from DC to Marvel.
Blasphemy.
Which, depending on what side of the fence you're on, I guess, but... those guys are already going to be the Fantastic Four. It's not them obtaining their abilities in this case. I kind of like that jumping off point for a superhero story like this. We get it. We know who he is. We know what he does. I mean, even if you're a casual, don't know the backstory of this character, it's not going to take you long to figure out what he is and what he can do. So, like you said, maybe they are transitioning to a different person taking on a Lantern moniker like that, which could be a lot of fun because, Hal Jordan's established now, and, this could be the next, whether it's Jon Stewart is another one, that could be the next potential one. I know there was some talks of that possibly being the next one they tried to do, and maybe they transitioned into that. That could be a lot of fun to dive into if that's the route that they go. I know there were also talks of Chris Pine being one of the other major finalists, Timothy Olyphant, who's a fantastic actor as well, was possibly tied to it. Yeah, but they're all older, so it's not like it's Ryan Reynolds and he was still relatively younger making that role and it working. Now you have to have an established Lantern, and maybe they explore more of the Green Lantern core, which we didn't really get to dive a ton into, which would be awesome. I'd love to see that because there are so many interesting Lantern stories that you can tell if you wanted to take a deep dive into that, and hopefully that's the route that they're going.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a big ensemble about the Green Lantern's core, so it's going to be interesting to see who takes the lead and what's the main story we're going to be following this, because you think, especially with big names like this, they're probably not going to be around in the series for too long, because I mean, if they're expecting it to be a multi-season series, that's some big names to try to carry along for many seasons and playing a big role. And, as James Gunn has talked about, that anybody who's playing these roles too are supposed to do it in animation and play it all the way throughout what they're doing. So, that is a big commitment, just like Marvel has been for some of these guys to commit to a long time to be playing this character. And then especially being older, you got to think it's going to be more of a pop in here and there and not a main star.
Which could be easier to do for these guys if that's what they want them going with. But there's still so much that we don't know about what direction they're trying to take with it, what they're trying to do with that. But it looks like we do have some forward, mobility on potential casting for this. And that's always exciting. You nail down your lead and you kind of build around from that. So we'll see, what direction they go with this. And, I'm excited for it. I always thought the Green Lantern is one of the cooler, DC heroes, in my opinion, outside of obviously Batman and Superman, but there's some interesting stories you could tell with that I'm excited to see what they come up with.
It's also one that's a little bit harder to do in live action just because it does require a lot of special effects and CG, kind of like Miss Marvel and everything else. You've got to have, it's the Ring doing all these different powers. It takes a lot of special effects to really do him right, as Ryan Reynolds found out with his CG suit and everything else. See if they've learned from those mistakes and find a way to do the Green Lanterns or do all the lanterns in live action properly.
Yeah, and hopefully in a way they do it in a way that makes sense. So, like I said, it's going to be awesome when they finally announce who it is. It looks like it's going to be Josh Brolin unless he turns the role down. Josh Brolin's fantastic, so I have no issues with him playing the lead if that winds up being the case. And like I said, we'll see where they take it from there.
Just keep adding Goonies, Thanos, Cable, Hal Jordan.
He's doing so much cool stuff, man. What a run he's had.
And you're doing a lot of that older in his life, just good on for him. Just having a lot of fun and doing these big tentpole things. Great for him.
Yeah, love to see it.
So moving on to another story here. So we talked about the Secret Level series that's coming to Prime Video in December. And we weren't sure if all the video games are coming to it. Well, one of the episodes is going to be based on Concord, a game that Sony released just 2 weeks ago. The problem is Sony's already pulled the game offline. There was a ton of backlash. A lot of people feeling like the character designs were very generic. They said the gameplay was okay, but this game was in the making for 8 years. And to pull it offline after 2 weeks is really wild and crazy. But it does seem like they're going to allow that episode to still air in December. So 3 months after they pull the game offline, they're going to debut an episode in this anthology series.
Yeah, and that just goes to show some of the power of backlash on the internet and what it can do for things, right? Like a game in development for that long that's outside of, some of your bigger games that are, taking forever, like anything Rockstar does, or Cyberpunk that wasn't without its issues. That was in development for seemingly forever, but this game seemed to have a lot of issues when it came out that sparked a lot of internet backlash. Enough so that they pulled the game, like you said. That's rare because a lot of times companies will stick to their guns. Like, nope, it's out. What are we going to do? We'll try to fix it in a later patch or something where they'll work on fixes to make the game more playable or more viable. But they pulled the plug on it, which is super rare because that's not a common occurrence for these companies. They usually, like I said, just stick to their guns. But it's going to be weird that it's going to be thrown into a TV episode. Obviously, I think it's because they were planning on it probably being a bigger deal than it was, and just incorporating it into the show, and the show's already, a couple months away from releasing. They can't really pull that episode, maybe. That's why it's going to stick in there. I'm going to be very interested to see what the internet has to say about this episode when it does make its way out, whether it's going to be, poked fun at mercilessly like the internet is one to do, but it's going to be interesting to see. What happens
if they like the episode and they're like, wait, where's the game? Can I play it? Because it was very vague, the statement that they gave when they pulled it off, because it sounded like in one way it could be dead and gone forever. In other ways, they might be trying to fix some of the issues and they're going to push the game back out afterwards. But it was also a game, I think a lot of the backlash was saying this should have been maybe they bring it back as a free-to-play model instead of, I think it was $40-$50 to get it. But it's just so strange that, they put all this work into it, 8 years into it. They worked with Blur Studios to have Concord included as an episode in that anthology series, and then they pull the game after 2 weeks.
It's crazy. It's a wild story to talk about because, like I said, this is such an abnormality in video games that it's having this integration into something else like this, that it's kind of unprecedented, really. And like you said, this could be one of those things that it gets mercilessly mocked when it comes out, or it could, like you said, drive interest in the game itself to, maybe have them re-release it and to kind of coincide with the series, and maybe that helps save the game. Who knows? But it's definitely a weird news story to talk about.
Yeah, that gives you roughly 3 months to maybe fix all the issues, and then the episode comes out and it's like, surprise, we're back.
Right, and it's just back out on the platforms and you can play it and everybody loves it. It'd be a fun redemption story, I think, if they could write the ship on it. But yeah, it was such a weird one. Like I've never seen anything like that. Like I can't remember of a news story like, obviously, one leading into the other like that, but it's just a weird thing that have a game just pulled immediately like that. And
but 3 months from now you can watch an episode based on it.
Yeah, and then how many people didn't play the game, like you said, and maybe you've heard about it and now they're seeing it in here, and just, I don't know, we'll see. It's gonna be fun to see in a couple months what happens when that episode does come out, and see if it drives up interest in the game again, because that would be fun if it swayed it in a more positive direction than the negative direction that we're so used to seeing.
So also the question to me is, will anybody even remember anything about it? So when that episode airs, will anybody really understand or know what it is? Like, what game is this? I don't know these characters. I don't know what's going on. Like, it could lead to just even more confusion. So I wonder if in the next few months there might be more discussions between Sony and Blur, or if they will continue to release this episode as part of the anthology. Because, like I said, yeah, it gone after 2 weeks. I barely know anything about it. I didn't get a chance to really look into it because it died so quickly. And yeah, will anybody even know what that episode is when it comes out?
Yeah, the truth will be out there eventually, and then we'll see what winds up happening. But it's going to be fun to follow, because I want to see how this winds up, because it's such a fascinating case for me that we're not used to seeing, and just kind of interesting to see what the fallout of all of it's going to be, whether they ultimately pull that episode or see what happens if they leave it in there and see what happens. I'm excited to see what happens. But I do want to move on to something that's definitely not something that anybody will forget anytime soon, and we've been talking about the Gollum movie, and it's getting made, or we've talked about, or some of the former cast, from the original Lord of the Rings movies going to make their returns in this and play the roles. Well, we did get some news from Sir Ian McKellen that he's going to be potentially reprising his role as Gandalf, which is amazing. Gandalf is an absolutely incredible character, so integral to and important to the original Lord of the Rings movies, and just kind of even The Hobbit, really. Like, he was such an integral person throughout this entire anthology, and seeing Sir Ian McKellen himself come back as Gandalf is just fantastic.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear him talk about it, because he's still kind of recovering from that fall he took off a stage. He's just talking about, he's 85 years old and he's just not bouncing back. He had to leave that play, and which he hated to do. Like, he still wants to work, still wants to act. And they even said that, I'm not letting anyone else put on that pointy hat and beard if I can help it, which is just fantastic.
I love that.
He was amazing as Gandalf. But, a lot of us are still kind of questioning exactly. I mean, we got Andy Serkis and we got Peter Jackson involved with this. But, we're still questioning, is a full movie about Gollum something that's really going to hold people's attention? And is Gandalf going to play an important role, or is it just going to be something like, hey, there's Gandalf?
It could be. I mean, we don't know. There's so much we still don't know. And there's also been some rumblings that Orlando Bloom could be potentially returning as Legolas as well, who was obviously one of the main characters in the original Lord of the Rings. I think the more they find that they can attach people to this, I think we'll definitely get more eyes on it. We'll see about the quality of the story. I have confidence that they're going to, whatever they make is going to be good. It's just, how is it connected to everything else, and will it stand on its own? I think it will, just based on who's potentially going to be working on this. But, time will tell on that. But getting Sir Ian McKellen in this is just, it's such a home run for me. I love Gandalf. I love him. I love his attitude towards it. He's like, yeah, as long as I'm around, nobody else is playing that role, which I love. I love that energy. So the fact that he's willing to still do it at 85, which you talk about, like, that's impressive. But you got to remember, he was he wasn't young when he made the original Lord of the Rings movies anyway, and that's not even talking about Christopher Lee.
He started with a very very young guy, and Christopher Lee is. Who
was a more advanced aged back then than even that. Like,
what was he in his 70s, 80s?
Yeah,
he was like 80s then, I think, when he
made those movies, which is incredible. And, just the fact that he's still willing to do it at that age, I love it, man. I love that energy, and I love that love and passion for his craft, that he's still like, I still want to do this. I still want to work. When he very much could have just been like, I'm 85. I could probably, just, live out the rest of my days just, retire and, go on and live your best life. But this is what he's passionate about and what he loves to do. So more power to him. Respect for, wanting to continue to do that. And I can't wait to see him put on the hat and the beard again to play that role. And he was just fantastic and in perfect casting. So.
I also love how he joked. He's like, I haven't really seen the script or what Gandalf's going to be doing, but I also haven't heard how much Gandalf is getting paid for it either. So
I love the energy, though. I love that. They'll take care of him to get him a part of that. So I'm that makes me a little more excited to see that than I already was. But you put him back in it, it's an automatic viewing.
Yeah, so hopefully it's something that gives him some life and some good things to do, even though, being older, so it's standing around talking. But, it did look like with The Hobbit, he had some issues and some problems. There's some behind the scenes that showed that he was a little saddened by some of the recording because he was in a room by himself. Like, he didn't have the other actors to bounce off. Like, he's talking to green screens or just something being held up to him to fill in for the hobbits and everything else. That he didn't seem to like that experience. So hopefully if he does return, that Gollum is a good experience for him, especially at his age and everything else, that he can come back and have a little fun with Gandalf one more time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Moving on to Ahsoka. So since the first season ended, we haven't really heard much about it other than that we know that there's a movie that's going to be coming at some point that will wrap up the Mandalorian and the Ahsoka storylines, everything that they've kind of built there. But we did get one of the actors was talking about, looks like summer 2025, that they're finally going to get around to filming season 2.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Ahsoka was fantastic. You had, it was a really, really good season. I'm excited that they're finally getting season 2. I'm excited to see where this all winds up, how it's all coming to a conclusion, coming to a head, and seeing what story they wind up telling. I love Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka. I think she was absolutely spot on casting in that role. Love to see the return of Hayden Christensen even, to kind of get his big moment as Anakin in that as well.
And let him take on the Star Wars, take on the Clone Wars version that we saw in the animated series, and bringing that to life was just so fantastic. Amazing. Seeing him in the outfit and the look and the hair was so good.
I'm really excited to see how they wrap everything up. It looks like you said, summer of next year they're going to start shooting, which probably puts the release sometime in 2026, which is around the time the Mandalorian and Grogu film is going to come out anyway. So if I were to guess, I'd say summer 2025 they shoot it, summer of 2026 the TV show comes out, and maybe fall, winter. Like, I know they like to release the Star Wars films later in the year around November, December time. Maybe December of 2026 we get the Mandalorian and Grogu film.
See, I thought they already announced summer for Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yeah, but I would think that they may adjust with, if it's going to line up with the TV show, unless they can get a quicker turnaround on Ahsoka, which I don't know how much, visual effects are going to have to go into putting that out quicker. But you got to figure if they're taking a couple months to shoot this show, like if you shoot it in June, it's going to go till August. How long is it going to take to do VFX work and all that stuff and editing to get that show ready to come out? That's what makes me think it could be that. I know they've talked about it. It's not the first time they've put a date on something and moved it to a later time.
We also don't know if Ahsoka has anything to do with the Mandalorian Grogu movie. Like, we haven't really heard any talk on that, if it's going to be their own adventure, if they're going to mix her back in at all. And so that could also alter, or if he's going to play any part in Ahsoka season 2. Like, based on that timing and both of those coming out in 2026 potentially, I do have a feeling that season 2 is probably going to be it for Ahsoka, because we're getting a Mandalorian Grogu movie instead of another season of The Mandalorian. At least that's our understanding right now. Sure. And so if that's in 2026, along with season 2, and we know there's a wrap-up movie coming, you're thinking 2028, 2029, if they go right into it after this, to be able to get that wrap-up movie. So based on all those potential timelines, it does feel like this might be the final season for Ahsoka.
Yeah, and I mean, they've told some great stories. It's been a great run with those. I'll be sad to see it come to an end, but I know they've got some stuff in the works beyond that that's going to be a lot of fun, and based on the rumors that we're hearing, nothing confirmed, obviously, but it does feel like they're going to move a little bit more back towards film and putting a heavier emphasis on some of the film stuff, which I'm more than excited for. I know they're talking about potentially exploring, other parts of the Star Wars universe that aren't Skywalker related, which is going to make the internet very happy. At least some of them, some of those people are going to complain no matter what, because the running joke is nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But I'm excited to see them, culminate this story and not let it overstay its welcome, and put out extra stuff that they may not be as involved in creatively or as passionate about, or it could potentially turn it sideways and sour a lot of people on it, because it is something that a lot of people seem to agree has been a great story, and just done really well, and kind of rekindled a lot of passion for Star Wars for a lot of people, just to see it come to this great conclusion in a way that leaves everybody happy and ready to move on to whatever they want to do next.
Yeah, because we do have Andor next year, which is ending with season 2, so it's supposed to be doing a lot of time jumps. That brings us up to the Rogue One movie, right, which they've also said this might change your view on some of the characters, some of the things that happened in Rogue One. So yeah, it looks like they are kind of wrapping up TV a little bit here and going back to films, which I'm all good for. But yeah, it does seem like that timeline where everything's fitting in, that when we finally do get Ahsoka season 2, it could be the last one.
Yeah, and that's a shame, but it's also something I'm looking forward to seeing how they wind up, because yeah, it's been that first season was really, really good, and I'm excited to see how they finish it.
I'm curious to see if we end up getting that Darth Maul and Obi-Wan that we got in the animated series, if we get that fight or battle maybe in Ahsoka, because we don't know if we're going to get another season of Obi-Wan. He's talked about, Ewan's talked about it. He would love to do it. If they greenlight it, he'll be there. But,
of course.
There isn't any talks that we know of that, Obi-Wan would return again.
Yeah, that would be amazing too. I know a lot of people were chomping at the bit to see if we get a return of Darth Maul. It was kind of a character that over the last 20 or so years really took off and gained a lot of popularity for a very brief appearance in the movies, but had a really, really good run in the animated shows that we'd like to see brought back to the the big screen. And maybe we'll see them go that route, but it's to be determined. But yeah, I'm excited to see how this all wraps up.
Yeah.
So for our final news story of the week, one of the film series that's been dormant for a little bit has been the Oceans series. Oceans 11 came out in the early 2000s, amazing cast. It had George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, yada, yada. I mean, if you've seen it, you know who all's in it. It even had the Ocean's 8 spinoff with the all-female cast in 2018, which was really well done as well. But it looks like we're finally going back to that main cast again for the first time in almost 17 years. And it looks like Ocean's 14 is going to be potentially greenlit and made. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, when I was looking back through that after seeing that Ocean's 14 was happening, I'm like, wait, 2007 was Ocean's 13, like 17 years ago. I'm like, how has it been 17 years? But it's been a long time. But I always enjoy this film. It's fun, kind of campy, but smart in ways. Heist film, you star-studded. Even got Don Cheadle doing a British accent throughout it and everything. There's a great cast through all of it. I'm looking forward to see if they can get a good story behind it. It looks like they've got Edward Berger behind. Did All Quiet on the Western Front. He's in talks to direct it, so it could be really fun. But again, we never know. We said the same thing with Top Gun coming back and everything else after this long, 17 years. Is it going to be able to have the same type of, flair and impact and fun that the originals had? And I hope they do. They've always been some really fun films to watch.
Well, if it winds up like the Top Gun series, I'm very excited about the possibility, because Top Gun Maverick was absolutely brilliant, right? Doesn't always work, but it could. These are those heist-type films. Those tend to do fairly well anyway. You throw all those actors into that cast again. I know it's talk of at least George Clooney and Brad Pitt being attached to it, which two big-time Hollywood actor names. So it's going to get a lot of eyeballs on it. We'll see who they add to it potentially.
I'm going ahead and throwing out Glenn Powell.
Glenn Powell would be fantastic in it as well. We love Glenn Powell. Glenn Powell could be in everything, and he has been. But throwing him in that would make a lot of sense too. But I'm excited about this, because those films are really good. I really liked all of those movies, so I'm excited to see another potential story here with these characters and see what kind of crazy hijinks they can get into, because it's a lot of fun. They're very underrated movies. I don't think they always get talked about as like these. It doesn't feel like it's always on a lot of people's top favorite movie list, but I'm going to spoil it and say Ocean's 11 is one of my probably 15 to 20 favorite movies. It's in that upper echelon for me, just because of how fun and how, like you said, just smartly written it was. And to have an ensemble cast like that of so many big names and it works is not all that common. It was almost Avengers-esque before the Avengers kind of thing. With
it really was.
Big star.
A lot of big names.
Big stars in this film coming together, and they all gel and they all work. So I'm excited to see the next iteration of this and what it could look like, because, like I said, those movies were a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see what story they tell.
Yeah, I think if they can do it right and they get most of the cast back that they can, of course, Bernie Mac was a part of it, but he's passed away, and you've got a few that have passed away now, so it's going to be interesting to see who the new blood is and how many of the old come back. But I mean, yeah, you've got your main two and George Clooney and Brad Pitt back. So hopefully with them on board, they're going to get a lot of the other cast to come back and hopefully have a really fun time.
Yeah, it hurt my heart when I was looking at this and saw that 2007 was 17 years ago. Just, it doesn't feel like it. It hurt my heart.
So the Ocean's 11 came out in 2001.
Yeah, which
so,
was
I mean, 23 years ago.
Which is insane. Yeah, we're getting old, man. We're getting old.
You got that ibuprofen?
Yeah, I have some right off camera. We'll take some when we break for this. But yeah, that's just crazy, man. Like it's been that long. You start looking at some of these stories when, like, how many different times have we had news stories now where it's like, this is coming back after 20 years. It's been 30 years since we last touched this, and we're like, oh my God, it feels like we just saw some of these movies like, fairly recently, and it's just been that big of a gap of time. It's just like, where does the time go? I don't want to like wax poetic about the passage of time or anything, but it's crazy to think about.
Please do.
No, I'm not going to do that.
But yeah, it's like you think it's maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Try 17.
Right. Like, oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just time flies by, man, and it's crazy. But I'm excited. This has got the potential to be really fun.
Yeah, I hope it is too, because like I said, I've really enjoyed all of them. Even the female-led spinoff was a lot of fun too, and. But to bring the main cast of guys back and stuff, I'm really looking forward to see how they can continue. And maybe they'll merge them together, and they'll bring the women in and the men in, and they'll have kind of a combined heist that they do together here.
Yeah, and then they're all thwarted by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right? That's because that's usually how that works, right? He'll play Hobbs, and we'll blend the Fast and Furious.
We got Hobbs and Shaw.
We'll go crazy.
Here comes Vin Diesel with a getaway car.
Right, yeah, talking about family. Let's just blend it all together, make it one big conglomerate.
He's driving a Transformer. Let's just go all out.
And then, Chris Pratt comes in riding a dinosaur or something. I don't know. We'll
that's too far.
Right,
you went too far.
That's why we workshop things, right? So don't let us make your movies.
So heading to our TV breakdown of the week, we have Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Episode 4. So we got the launch kicked off with 3 episodes, which was kind of a lot to binge and take in, and now we've got down to the singular episode drops. But again, this is a series that it is controversial. There's a lot of people who just loathe it and despise it because Amazon didn't get all the rights to everything Lord of the Rings, so they can't use some story points or some things they can't use, so they're winging and making up a lot of stuff, and some stuff works, some things don't. Sure. But I've enjoyed it for the most part. I'm not a huge stickler on it has to be exactly like the books and the whole story. I mean, I would like to have that consistency with stuff, but episode 4 did bring a big character into the Rings of Power universe that hasn't appeared in live action yet. So it's a popular character from the book, and he makes an appearance and potentially has, he's a fun character that a lot of people like from the book. There was a lot of discussion. Why wasn't he in Peter Jackson's films and stuff? But we finally get him here. But, most of this episode, even though we do have many paths that still are continuing, we get a lot with the hobbits. So we get a lot of information that is released with Nori and Poppy and the stranger as they're still wandering through this desert.
Yeah, because at the end of the last episode, we're going to get a little light spoilery now that we're 4 episodes in. So talking about some of the plot threads, if we're doing an episodic watch-along like this, we can't avoid. So if you haven't seen it yet, go watch the episode, come back and hear some of our thoughts on it here. But yeah, you get the hobbits looking for, the stranger now that they've gotten separated by the sandstorm that, the stranger created in the last episode that kind of blew them off. We didn't know where they wound up going. They wound up going to a different part of the desert, basically, and they're trying to find their way back to the stranger. So now they come across another hobbit. So they find this person, and they're like, who are you? Where are you from? He winds up leading them to this underground, city, more or less, full of this other neighborhood, down in valley. It's fun. It's fun to see how it just kind of led down into this area, and you see a whole other conglomeration of hobbits, and it was really cool to see one family of hobbits finding another in this case, and there being some doubt as we don't allow outsiders, but once they figure out, how they're connected, there's some bonding that goes on there, and there's some trust built, and it's a really fun story to get them on their way to finding the stranger. And you're starting to see a little bit of that starting to weave into each other a little bit and kind of come together. I think that we're going to wind up with, hopefully by the end of this season, where a lot of these stories are going to kind of, conglomerate and meet up, and we get like a little bit more of a linear path than just like starting all the way out here and coming together kind of thing. But it seems like we're on that path. But it was really fun to see them, kind of move along and meet this other family of hobbits, to where they get some of the things they've learned over the years starting to make a little more sense and click in how things are in the real world for them. And it was a fun story for them. I really enjoyed that.
And continue on that they kind of tied him up and was questioning him on stuff, and they brought up who the leader of theirs is, and it kind of brings up to the leader of the stores here, this group of hobbits, that there's more lore here when it comes to the hobbits. So we take into a painting and we see on the wall, and it's very clearly the Shire, and you've got Hobbiton. Like, well, it was rumored that, or it's been lore and legend that this hobbit set off to find this magical land of green rolling hills and running water and streams and everything else. And it seems like it's very much tied to Nori and Poppy's, but she kind of breaks down. And little spoiler with it here is that they're like, well, he never found it. Like, because the song that Poppy sings seems to be a song that's related to him, but he never made it to this magical land that all of them are supposed to be. All hobbits are going to live in just prosperity, and everything will be fine and great once he finds this great land.
I mean, obviously, if you know anything about their story, they ultimately find it, and it's very much about the Shire. If you haven't put that together watching it yet, so it's cool to see them all, eventually knowing where they're going to wind up. It gives you a little bit of hope for these people who are nomadic and just kind of always on the move, looking for this home that obviously they'll find, and we'll see if they wind up getting there by the end of the series.
I was going to say, do they find it during this series, this season, or this series overall?
It could. It's still up in the air, but it is good to know that at least that's coming through. You're starting to have like people, speculate on who certain characters are or were, or their importance to the overall story that we already do know. A lot of people speculating on who this stranger ultimately is. I kind of agree with one of the main theories on who he is. I won't get into that here, but you also have his story of trying to find the hobbits while still on his own journey. So he makes his way, and he finds this man sitting there, as he's looking for these people, and starts to question him a little bit. And it is this character that we've been, like, if you've read the books, you know who this character is. And he finally shows up, points him in the direction of a tree, and the tree swallows him up, which is a really weird, like, it was just a weird turn, like, what's going on with this tree kind of thing, and why is he swallowing the stranger all of a sudden? But that you get a little bit more of an advancement for the stranger story here too, where he's starting to kind of slowly figure out like what it means to be a wizard, and he's looking for his staff, and you get a little bit more information about that. And he's kind of this person that he meets. It's definitely not who he seems at first, but you wind up getting a little bit more of a backstory on him too, and what he is, and how long he's been around, and what he's about, and what he sees, and what he knows. And it's a lot of, it sounds complicated, but it's really not as much. They do a pretty good job of laying it all out in this episode, where you get a lot of exposition here, and it's done really well, I think.
And that stranger ends up being Tom Bombadil. So it's a character that so the swallowing of the tree is also tied to something he saved Merry and Pippin in one of the stories from a tree swallowing them. So they kind of repurposed that for this introduction because he's a very musical guy, so he's always humming and singing and everything else. But we get to learn a lot more lore about him, and we could see how much of a connection that he may have with this series, because we learn that he calls himself the eldest. Like, he is older than everything. He remembers the first trees and the first rainfall, and he remembers the stars and existed before the stars. And so this is a character that has a big legacy that, he was explored in the books. I don't think it went extremely deep on him. So we'll see how deep they expand in their own way with him here. But I thought the actor did a great job as him,
really good.
blending between, because he's kind of a guy who's kind of all-knowing, but also a little aloof. So he's trying to give information, but not give information, because, you know, Gandalf. I'm already calling the stranger Gandalf, even though he's not Gandalf. A lot of
people
don't know if he's Gandalf.
But...
We just know him as the stranger. So we had two strangers meeting. We get one of their names, but he's talking to him like, well, can you teach me? Because he sees that he can control the elements. So he's doing stuff with fire and talking with animals and talking with trees, that he's connected to basically everything. Yeah. He's like, well, can you teach me this and that? Well, I don't know if you're ready. Can you teach me how to wield a staff? I'm like, you're not ready yet. You will be one day. So he becomes this kind of just all-knowing type of character. Like, even when some guys and people show up, he's just like, hold on a second. Like, he just knows seemingly everything that's happening.
Yeah, so he mentions that, you know, the stranger's not yet ready to wield the staff, because you see him trying to break a branch off of, you know, this tree that's supposedly meant to be his staff, right? But the tree doesn't bend or break for him, which lets him to say, you know, hey, you're not ready yet to do this. He said, but you're also not the first, you know, Istar to, you know, seek me out for these types of answers. And he goes into the backstory of this dark wizard who also came to him, who's, you know, very much the exact opposite of this stranger right now. And you've come to see that he's the one that's trying to hunt down the hobbits. You know, he's kind of pulling the strings of a lot of things right now, and he's not Sauron, but a lot of people are starting to speculate who this dark wizard is. If you've read The Lord of the Rings, who are the two main wizards? That's who a lot of people think that these two characters are, Gandalf and Saruman, right? Are they that wind up who these two are meant to be, right? We don't know, but, you know, that's where the speculation is going right now. But, you know, he's the other one that tried to seek him out. He's ready. You kind of want to be wary of this dark wizard, obviously, and you start to see some of that play out a little bit with him, you know, doing his best to try to find these hobbits and get them, because he feels, I don't know if he necessarily feels like if they can lead the, you know, the stranger to really remember who he is, that could be problematic for him and what he's trying to do. So he's trying to get out ahead of it first, and you start to see that play out a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot of really fun, like stuff for them to kind of dig into moving forward through the rest of the season. That's going to be really interesting to watch.
And again, I can see where, you know, those who are purist with the Lord of the Rings stories are not going to like any of this, because they're changing his introduction and his connection to everything. Yeah. Because, you know, he also tells Tom tells the stranger that it's basically your destiny that you're going to face off against the Stark Wizard and Sauron. Like, it's up to you, which if that is Saruman, well, you know, they're friends and they're you know, confidants with each other in the Lord of the Rings. So it's like, is this another wizard? Is he related to Saruman? Like,
could be.
How exactly we get that? But we've still got a lot of unanswered questions. Like, I can see with a lot of people, this can be very hard to follow when it comes to, I mean, Lord of the Rings has always been very deep in lore. He created his own languages and stuff for these books, and he's written so much stuff, even things that he didn't fully complete, of just building out this world. And, you know, they're changing quite a lot of it, so we just got to see exactly where this is going. And, you know, we have the Hobbit story, we have the Stranger story, which they each have kind of their own paths now. Like, they're still on the same path, but now we've got this lore about finding the Shire, and then we have him. Well, now he knows he's got to face off against these wizards, but he still doesn't even know who he is. And,
right. It's a lot of stuff to get into.
And we didn't really touch on man in this episode much. We went back over to the elves. So we did get some with the elves. So we got Elrond and Galadriel are kind of on a mission to find kind of what's going on there. Basically, Galadriel has been brought into the army, but she's underneath him, and he is still untrusting of her. He doesn't trust the ring, doesn't want to follow anything she's saying because he thinks the ring is in control. So there's a lot of interesting back and forth between her and Elrond, and to see how that goes. We also get them battling and get a lot more creatures from the Lord of the Rings being shown in this episode, which kind of where I get into where it's a lot, because I mean, we're dealing with wraiths and we have the Ents and we have like just so much stuff going on with these elves, and they also run into the orcs, and it's like That's a lot. Like, this is an hour-long episode where we have the Hobbit story, the Stranger story, we have the Elf story, and that's not even all of the stories in here.
Yeah, that's a lot. If you think that's a lot, it's because it is. But they don't waste any time in this show either, which I appreciate, because it's in an hour, but you get a lot of meat in an hour to kind of work through, and that's where I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of watching this, because you also have this piece of the show where it's Arendir going on this rescue mission to find Theo, and he takes Isildur and Estrid with him, who we meet in this last episode. You come to find out in that episode that she's really a wildling who has this mark, and she winds up burning the mark through to create like this scar. Well, she gets caught in this episode by Arondir, who like notices the mark and kind of calls her out, and eventually winds up taking her prisoner, but knows like he needs her to help find where these people went because they are her people. And they go on this adventure, and that's where we run into the Ents, and they find Theo, and it's this really cool like back and forth with the Ents. The Ents are just fascinating beings in the Lord of the Rings, especially in like the Two Towers movie, which was really them like kind of fleshing out who they were and what they were about, kind of thing. And it's a really cool like face off that they have there, where they eventually get the Ents on their side. And it was a really cool like needle, it was a really cool thread in a story that didn't advance a ton, but I think we got them finally all bonding together and kind of moving towards the next mission that they're about to go on as well. And like I said, it's just so much to kind of keep track of in this episode, but I like it. It's busy, but it's busy in a way that keeps everything moving forward. It's not too stagnant. So that's what I appreciate most about this show so far.
Yeah, when I said we didn't really touch on Man, of course we had Isildur was part of that storyline with finding Theo and everything, and with the woman, like is that eventually his wife? Like we've got kind of a love story that's building there, but we don't know exactly where it's going to go, because at the end we kind of get a twist like, oh, okay. But it was mainly like the queen and that part of the kingdom of men. We didn't really get a touch on that one, which is kind of good because it was already just loaded with so much stuff. But I did enjoy pretty much everything that happened. Like we got some good movement on each side, but we're 4 episodes in of an 8-episode season. There's so much stuff that they're building up. Like it's just going to see, are they going to be able to get us, where are we going for this season with 4 episodes left after this? Because we've got them still feeling like they're at the beginning of the journey, that they haven't gone that deep in. Like the elves seem to be progressing a little bit more because they end up coming along the orcs, who they suspect are marching, and it's related to Sauron, and that all this is building, and it looks like we're heading to a war and stuff. So they're progressing a little bit more. The hobbits were still stuck in that early to middle stage with them, and so there's still a lot to happen here, and we don't know how many seasons we're going to be having of the show. It's a very expensive show. It's a gorgeous show, as we've talked about, but we're getting the story progressing, but where's it going? And we also didn't get anything else on the dwarves this episode either. So again, there's just, even though we had all of this crammed into 1 hour, there was still 2 big groups important to this overall story that wasn't touched on. We didn't even get Sauron and anything else with the rings that was being made with the other elves. We didn't get any continuers of that. So felt we got so much, but there's still so much that we didn't touch on.
Yeah, there's a lot to explore, and it's gonna be fun to see where they focus the next episode, because it did kind of feel like with the way these stories like progressed in the ways that they did, that you can kind of go away from it to kind of get to the other ones to kind of bring it out. And like I said, that's where I feel like they're branching out to come together, and you're starting to see where all of these are going to eventually start to overlap, because they're all connected, right? You have, this dark wizard who's going to have a connection to Sauron, that we know the stranger is going to play a big part in facing off with those two. That's going to involve the hobbits coming together. And obviously, you've got the elves on their hunt for Sauron. That's why I'm saying, if you look at it from like a big picture view, you could see where it's all going to overlap and come together.
It's branching out this way. We're still waiting for it to start moving.
Yeah, and I think we're going to start seeing that a little bit more, especially in the next episode or two, probably, where you get these things out and you're going to start seeing it contract, and they're all moving towards okay, we know they're going to be here, so we're all working to here, and that's where I feel like it's going to get by the end of the season. But it's a lot of fun to watch them get there because they are telling you a good story. Like, I like when you have exposition like this because it does give you stakes. It helps you, attach to these characters and care about them and care about their motivations and care about their stories, to where we do have it doesn't all need to be, action and, war and conflict all at the same time.
We got a decent amount of action in here. There was shorter action, but it was decent action.
But you get a taste of it too, so it's not like beating you over the head with just that. Because, one of the things other shows don't do as good a job on, there's a lot of great fight scenes, but why do you care about the people involved in them? It's giving you reasons to care about all these people, and you see like where they're coming from and where they're going. So I think they're doing a good job of that. Now they need to take this and continue to push it all forward to a point where they can all come together, and it feels like that ensemble that it needs to be to kind of work towards the same common goal of ultimately stopping Sauron and saving Middle-earth. It's kind of where they're all trying to get to. They're just approaching it from all different points to come together to, eventually help that and make that work. So I'm excited to see where they move in the next couple episodes, because there's a lot of fleshing out that they can do while also pushing it forward to get to that point. I think I'm excited to see where they take it.
And I will say that the fight scene at the very end with the
really
orcs
good.
with Galadriel was fantastic. Awesome. Like it's elves. It's big, over the top, because they can pose and they move and they're
cool.
They're so just smooth and
fluid.
fluid when they do everything, and seeing everything she was doing there was a lot of fun. But we also leave her in a predicament at the end of this episode. Elrond is kind of walked off without her, but he believes she did it for
the ring and not them.
Yeah, bad reasons. It was all about saving the ring and not saving the other elves. But it's going to be interesting to see exactly how that story plays out. For those who don't know the whole lore and everything within where they end up and where they're at in the Lord of the Rings, movies and everything else, like it's going to be interesting to see where we leave these characters, because there is such a still butting heads and bad blood between Elrond and Galadriel and pretty much everyone. And where we go from here is going to be interesting, because we left in episode 3 where the rings were being made for the dwarves, so we've still got the rings to be made for man. Are we going to get that touched on in this season as well? Seemingly we are. Maybe that's where we move in next with, the queen, which we talked about, everything that happened there, where is she going to be the queen anymore? We don't kind of know exactly what's happening there. I would say the dwarves and, the queen and that storyline is going to be touched on in the next episode. Absolutely. And see kind of where else we build and how long we have to wait to see, what happened to Galadriel.
I'm excited for that. Like I said, this is, the season's halfway over now. I know it's only 2 weeks, but we got 4 more weeks. It feels weird to say we've been watching a show for 2 weeks now. We've got 4 weeks to go, but we're already halfway. The math doesn't math there. But like episodic wise, we're halfway through the season now. So like I said, it's going to be a lot more rush to the end to see where we leave off. I got a feeling this may be a 3 or 4 season show, if I were to guesstimate.
There's just so much.
There's so much more they can do, but I think at the very least it's going to be 3 seasons, depending on money and everything like that. It's still very highly watched, despite what a very vocal minority, I think, is what it is, of people that are watching this show. Like, very vocal about it.
It's got its problems, it's got its issues, and if you're a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, there's some stuff you can find problems with, an issue with, and it depends on I'm able to let it go and just try to watch what they're trying to do. I'm separate. I know it's connected, but I'm separating this from the main Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, like trying to take it as its own thing.
It's an interpretation or an adaptation of a work that's already done. It doesn't always have to be 100% faithful. 100% faithful adaptations don't always translate well in a TV or movie format.
And as I mentioned earlier, they didn't get the rights to everything either to his other works.
So there's things they may not be able to work with.
They can't do everything.
So take it for what it is, knowing what you know about it and the way they get there. If you're able to separate those two, I think you'll find a lot of enjoyment in this series. But I'm having a lot of fun watching it. I'm not as anti it. Is it a perfect show? No, but I think it does a lot of things really well that has kept me on the hook for this show, that I'm ready to see it all the way through and see where they wind up taking it. Just because I am as faithful to the at least the original movies as I am, which eventually when we do have an episode where we talk about our favorite movies, it's going to be represented in there, and it's going to be represented very highly on my list. Spoiler alert, one of them I think is the perfect movie, but we'll get there. But yeah, it's done a good job so far, and like I said, if you're a fan of exposition, if you're a fan of fantasy and whimsicalness, like it does a really good job of integrating that into the story, and I think you'll have a lot of enjoyment. But I'm excited to see where these next 4 weeks take us.
Yeah, I do think season 2 has been a lot stronger than season 1. Season 1 had some problems and issues, especially with pacing and everything else. Again, there's so many stories going on. I think it's going to be at the end to see if the pacing was correct for season 2, because are we going to get any payoffs with the 37 storylines that are going on right now, which again, that's kind of part of Lord of the Rings. There are so many characters and so much stuff going on, but world. It can be a little hard to follow at times, but it's also, you know, there's a lot of lore and a lot of stuff to go over. And I think they've done a fair job so far in season 2 of presenting something interesting that gets me looking forward to the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we've got 4 more episodes left of the season, and we'll see where they go with that. But you can catch all 4 episodes right now of Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2 on Amazon Prime. So now we want to move on to our film review of the week. It is Beetlejuice, this sequel to the original Beetlejuice film that came out in the 80s. Tim Burton back to direct this as well. A lot of the main cast is returning. You have Catherine O'Hara, Winona Ryder, obviously integral in that. Michael Keaton is Beetlejuice. You also get the addition of, you know, Willem Dafoe, Jenna Ortega as well as added to this cast. And I got to tell you, man, like I kind of went in fearful that it wasn't going to live up to, you know, the original film in a lot of ways, because it is such a really well done, you know, quirky, campy type movie that I didn't think it was going to hold up well. But I got to be honest with you, I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed the movie, because I feel it kept a lot of the same, like, tones of the original, kind of updated and modernized it a little bit. And you still had, you know, the musical numbers and, you know, some of the humor, and some of it's cheesy. A lot of it is cheesy, but I think it's the point of the movie, and it's part of the charm for me. Like, it doesn't always work, but in this case, I really feel like it worked, because it wasn't too much, but I think it was just enough.
It was kind of just going back to that classic filmmaking of the original. It was trying to make you feel like you're kind of watching the original again, but in a different way. Like, you got a lot of practical effects. You've got the sandworm still looking like the stop motion animation and everything with it. You got stop motion stuff with Beetlejuice with his eyes popping out and everything. Like, I found it so just fun to see how easily Michael Keaton just slipped right back into Beetlejuice. He looked like he was just having a blast playing Beetlejuice again. And like all of them, like it has its issues, but I had fun with it overall. Like, I was laughing and having a good time throughout this film. It was ridiculous. It was campy. It was silly. It was over the top. But it was a good time. Like, I had a good time watching this, and like it seemed like everybody making the film was having a good time, other than, you know, Jenna Ortega, because she's supposed to be, you know, an angsty young person who's rebelling against her mom because she doesn't believe that her mom can talk to ghosts, because that's kind of the basic storyline overall with Beetlejuice is that, you know, we're jumping back into him 30 years later. So we have, you know, Lydia is off doing a ghost house show, so she's talking to different people with their possessions and, you know, talking about ghosts and stuff, but that's left her kind of leaving her daughter by the wayside, and we get to learn about what happened with the dad and everything like that. And then we get an update on where, you know, the stepmom, where she is, and she's still crazy over the top with her art and everything like that. And so we're getting an update on where all these characters are. A few characters, you know, get killed off, and we get to see exactly what happened there. But there's also some fun ways that they continue some characters on without having like the original actors come back or anything like that. And like we get classic scenes. We get the ticket taking and people who recently died sitting around, and we got some new and interesting deaths that we get to see in there. And we get a Danny DeVito, which it's been shown in the trailer, so it's not, you know, a spoiler with it, but his is short, but it's fun to see him as this like zombie janitor type guy, and how you know, that progresses. And we got some fun stuff, and like you said, William Dafoe in there was just such a silly, fun, over the top, because he plays an actor who was, when he was living, was big on the detective type of crime movies, and so he died. And he's kind of continuing it in the afterlife, pretending to be a detective. And you have an assistant that's giving him coffee all the time. So there's just so many empty things of coffee being spilled and thrown away, and you get trash cans overflowing and just getting
so
silly and over the top. But it looked like Willem was having such a blast doing that role as well.
Yeah, and you get, it's a very meta take on itself, really, because it's almost like it's parodying itself without taking itself too seriously. You know what I mean? And it's so much fun. Like you said, they look like they were having a lot of fun filming it. I know Winona Ryder was very passionate about getting this movie made as well. Like, she even wrote it into her contract in Stranger Things that if this did get to be made, they had to work it out to where she could film both. And it's really cool to see her come back to the role of Lydia after all this time, and would it still hold up very well. And you kind of see where, her ability to speak to the dead comes into play. And part of the friction between her and her daughter is, well, you claim ghosts are real, but my dad is no longer with us and you can't talk to him. Why is that? And that does get paid off in a way in this movie. And you find out why that's the case without spoiling it, but you get a very definitive reason as to why they can't. And you start to get a little bit more of a look into like the afterlife and what goes into it, and where, people who are in limbo versus people that actually get to make it to the great beyond, as they like to call it. And there's a soul train.
You got aboard the soul train.
Just like Soul Train,
so
the
those
TV
who
show.
are
It's a ton of,
older like us understand that
the
reference.
Soul Train. It was so fun, but they have updated songs in it. It's, like I said, it's so cheesy, it's so campy, it's so funny. Like, the dialogue written for Beetlejuice is, Beetlejuice himself is just spot on. With
it's like there was a
character.
day in between him playing Beetlejuice in 88 to now.
Yeah, and one of the fascinating things about it that I was reading about it and looking into like the background of how they went into making this, apparently Tim Burton didn't go back and rewatch the original for any type of inspiration in the second one. And watching this film, you couldn't tell, because it really felt like a faithful like transition from one movie to the other. Like, it very much felt like you went from, like you said, a day in between shooting the end of that film and the end of this one. And it was just smooth. It was seamless. Everything was done in a way that, practically for that setting would make sense. And it was just so much fun. I wound up like really liking it a lot more than I thought I would, because I was worried with that gap in time that, is it going to hit as well as it did? And I really think it did. I thought it was really fun. And I know people that I've talked to that were big fans of the first one that have already gone and seen it like we have, that they really enjoyed it too. So I'm happy to see that that's still resonating with people that, do love that movie as much as they do. And the fact that they love the sequel too, as much as the first one, it really, I really think it's going to help the movie in the long run, that people are, finding that enjoyment in it like we have. And I'm glad that people are having that viewership experience as well.
I did enjoy the addition of Justin Theroux as
absolutely.
the manager / fiance of Lydia. So he was so over the top, but he did it so well. He was ridiculous, but he was even like, he gets rid of all the candy and he's handing him, oh, you get a carrot and you get apples and only one each. And they take the whole thing, but they don't realize it's not candy. But like, he was so campy and silly and over the top, which was, hearkening back to a character. Of course, the actor passed away, who was interior designer on the first Beetlejuice, who was very over the top. He kind of fills that role.
Yeah, he fills that role.
But he was a lot of fun, even though he was really over the top. Like, Jen Ortega was just fantastic to be Lydia's daughter. Like, she fit in so well, and a lot of the story revolves around her. So, she pushes the story forward by she, gets mad at her mom while they're her grandpa's died. So Lydia's dad dies, and they all come back to the town, come back to the house and everything for his funeral. And, she gets mad at her mom and she goes down the town. She ends up running into a boy. And this kind of kicks off the rest of the story for this movie, where we get some twists and turns. And it was predictable, but it was still fun to do that. But it did have a few issues with things like, I know a lot of people would love to see Alec Baldwin and, Gina Davis return. We know the troubles that Alec Baldwin has going on with stuff, and they kind of just very quickly kind of give you an answer to it, but it's just kind of like brushed off in the end. And then I will say, like, even though I had a ton of fun with the movie, the plot in the end was just kind of very thin.
Yeah, it's thin.
It just served to serve the humor and the fun of it. Like, it was just there to help service and move along and not tell something extremely deep. I mean, we get a lot of connections and emotions with Lydia and her daughter and the dad and the relationship and everything else, but it just goes kind of right through it. It's very thin.
I gotta say, if you're going to see Beetlejuice and you're looking for a deep philosophical plot,
you shouldn't be looking. You're not good.
You're looking in the wrong places, barking up the wrong trees for that. This is just meant to be a ton of fun. You know, very stylized in a very Tim Burton way, which Tim Burton, I'm so glad he's back making like TV shows and films again, because I know he was kind of off of that for a while. Like, it had been a while before Wednesday came out that he was really like, you know, making bigger projects like that again. And I love the fact that, you know, he's found his new Winona Ryder and Jenna Ortega, it seems to be, with them collaborating on Wednesday, and now, you know, with Beetlejuice, and then back to Wednesday season 2 that they're making together. Like, I'm excited that they're collaborating, because I really feel Jenna Ortega is like the this new generation's like horror icon, really. Like, she's, you know, had the horror films that she's done, and then the Scream franchise, and then Wednesday, and then, you know, coming back to Beetlejuice. Like, I really feel like she's kind of really coming into her own at such a young age, of like being this, you know, scream queen, for lack of a better term. And like, she does such a good job at this that it's going to be fun to see when she transitions from the younger roles to the more adult roles that she's going to wind up taking too. And it's going to be fun to see her career kind of just continue to escalate as it has been, because her star's shining really bright right now, and it's fun to see. But yeah, she does such a great job as, you know, the antithesis of Lydia here, and you get to see that relationship evolve throughout the film in a way that's practical for the film, and it makes sense. And it'll be fun to see if they do ever come back for a third one of these, depending on how well it does, because it kind of leaves the doors open that it possibly could, to see where they would go next and to see how that would transition to another film. But yeah, this was a good time, man. I really, really enjoyed this one a lot more than I thought I would.
One thing that when you were talking about Jenna Ortega, which brought up some of the dance numbers and stuff, again, they looked like they were having so much fun. So she looked like she was having a ball, having the, you know, you got the possessed dance numbers that happen with Beetlejuice and stuff. But there's also some musical numbers throughout the film that I wasn't expecting, where you got Beetlejuice lip syncing to a bunch of different songs. And it's just, it's ridiculous and over the top, but it is so much fun. And Michael Keaton, the looks he gives at times, and especially when he's singing, like he's given his heart and his soul into lip syncing those songs. And it was a ton of fun. But I'd say probably one of the biggest things that stuck out to me with kind of, it's not an issue, but it's something like this character pretty much could have been left out of the movie and didn't have much of an impact. And that's what we end up learning is his ex-wife. We learn the origins of Beetlejuice and how he died, and we get to see his ex-wife, who ends up being, you know, brought back to life in the afterlife, and she's going on kind of a rampage to find him. But in the end, she didn't really have much of a bearing on the movie at all. Like, she spends the whole movie trying to find him, and once she does, it's over in just a couple minutes. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, she looked great, and the acting was great, and there were some fun scenes with her, but it was like, in the end, like, her character really played no importance other than giving us his origin.
It was a reason to include some of the other characters in the film, I think, and allow them to shine a little bit. So it was kind of, that was the vehicle that it served. But yeah, as far as like having this huge overall importance to the story, didn't really make that big of an impact. But at the end of the day, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really care. Had this been a different movie, I might have, you know, picked it apart a little more than I did. But it like I said, you're not going for these films for the plot. You're going for the humor. You're going for the over-the-top campiness. You're going for the music stuff. If you love the original,
turn your brain off and enjoy that.
It's going to check so many boxes if you like the original, and it's a really faithful, you know, continuation of that story in a way that I think, if like I've told everybody that I've talked to about it already, if you love the first one, go see the second one. You will enjoy it.
Yeah, I have a feeling if you liked Beetlejuice at all, that you're going to enjoy this one.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun to go see in the theater. We had people in our theater laughing, clapping along, you know, just having a really good time, you know, seeing this movie, which is definitely needed. And it was a lot of fun. I can't recommend it enough. Go see it in the theaters if you can, because this is a fun. I don't know how long it's going to last. I haven't seen what the box office numbers for it are going to look like.
I have a feeling
it'll do pretty well. Our showing was sold out, so I know like a lot of people in our area went to see it, but we'll see what it winds up doing and how long it winds up lasting, because I don't know if it's going to make it all the way to Halloween necessarily.
This seemed like a movie that would have been great to release at Halloween instead of now. Like maybe once it's finished its run, they'll do a limited release back again around Halloween, and because it's a perfect, because I mean it takes place at Halloween, around Halloween and stuff too. So yeah, it's a Halloween movie, so maybe they'll do a re-release. But yeah, it was a ton of fun. It's campy, it's silly, it's ridiculous, it's over the top. The plot is thin, but just turn your brain off and laugh and have some fun. Like if you enjoyed the original Beetlejuice, even the you know that one was more about a couple that had passed away and they're finding their way through the afterlife and everything. And this is more centered around Beetlejuice and his ridiculousness, and with Lydia and her daughter. And, it does its story well enough to provide an entertaining couple hours here in the movie theater. Like if you enjoyed the original Beetlejuice, I don't see why you wouldn't enjoy Beetlejuice, because it's a love letter to it. It's a very kind of safe, simple, but just love letter to the original Beetlejuice. Michael Keaton is just in perfect form again as Beetlejuice. He's having so much fun doing such ridiculous over the top stuff, even with like the Bob and all the other shrunken head guys. Yeah. Had a lot of fun with that stuff. Like it was fun. It was a really fun movie. It's not going to be a award-winning movie for anything. Maybe they'll get some stuff for the practical effects, which are fun, but
I could see that.
It's just a fun movie to go enjoy and laugh and just be silly.
It's going to be a fun one to add to people's Halloween rotations.
It'll definitely go into the Halloween rotation. It's
definitely one that I could see myself rewatching around Halloween time or at various other times. The rewatchability of the movie, I think, is very high, which in a lot of ways speaks to, just I like watching fun movies on repeat. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It doesn't always have to be, a life-changing story that I could throw on repeat. That's going to be one. I think that one's going to do really well, in my opinion, when it comes to like a TNT or a TBS, one of those that'll show it on like a Saturday afternoon, and you want to throw something on while you're cleaning the house. That's going to be one that I think people will like enjoy in that setting, if that makes sense to anyone else, because it makes sense to me. But it's like one of those movies that like it comes on and you want something on in the background while you're cleaning your house too. Like that's a good one to have on, and I think it'll make its way into a lot of people's Halloween rotations too.
Yeah, I definitely believe with you. It's going to be added to the Halloween rotations for people that are going to watch all throughout October and the spooky season stuff, because it's got light horror elements. It's horror comedy, so I mean, there's some little scare, and not exactly scares, but it tries to get you with a few things, because you get ghouls and skeletons and zombies and all that other stuff. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a fun one to add to the Halloween rotations.
Yep, definitely one to add to that. And it's like I said, I've done this for the last couple films that we've watched, but if I were to give it a rating out of 10, just the film itself overall, it's not the best movie you're ever going to watch, but I'd still give it like a 7. But if you that's factoring in the fun aspect of the film. If I were to just give it a 1 to 10 on a fun scale, it's like an 8 or 9 as far as like fun, like a fun watch. So if you're looking to just go have fun and watch a movie, this is definitely one to check out.
Yeah, it's just fun, silly, campy, ridiculous, over the topness. Just go in, relax, enjoy, watch a movie, and have a ton of fun with it. We can't recommend going and seeing Beetlejuice enough. It is just one of those just light, refreshing, fun, even though it's dealing with death and everything else. It's a light, refreshing, fun movie that you can have a really good time with it, especially those who are over 40 or around 40 and even, older than that are going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it because of the Soul Train references and the old callbacks to Beetlejuice and everything of that time. Like it was just a lot of fun. But Beetlejuice is in theaters now. Go check it out.
Absolutely.
So coming up this week, we have Speak No Evil. So we've got James McAvoy in a horror film that looks quite a thriller horror that looks pretty good. I'm excited to see that one. And then we have The Killer's Game, which we've got Dave Bautista playing a hitman who thinks he's dying and puts a hit out on himself, but, well, you're not dying. And now he's got to try to survive all of these other assassins who are out to get him.
Yeah, that one looks like a lot of fun, too. So 2 really good movies that I'm looking forward to going and checking out, because it's if you go to the theaters frequently, like we were talking about this before we went on, it feels like I've been seeing the trailer for Speak No Evil for like a year. It feels like every movie we've, outside of the kids movies that we've gone and seen, like the Pixar and the the animated films we've gone to see, every other non-animated film feels like it's had this trailer in front of it for like a year. Like it's finally here, finally coming out. I'm excited to check it out. It looks really good. It looks, he looks creepy and sinister, and I'm excited to see him take on a role like that because
it's so bulked up.
It looks like, he looked like he got jacked for this movie too, which is good for him. And like it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun if you're into that psychological horror thriller type film. Like it looked like it's definitely going to be one to remember, hopefully.
It's kind of interesting because we got Professor X, his bulked up, Batista. He's been losing a lot of weight because he talked to how difficult it is at his age to continue to keep that big body that he has with wrestling and playing Drax and everything. And he's definitely slimmed down. He's still muscular and very fit, but he's definitely slimmed down a lot. I think he said in an interview for the Killers game that he's dropped, I think 60, 70 pounds from when he was playing Drax.
He looks a lot lighter. It's a little striking if you're so used to seeing him as the big hulking animal Batista from WWE back in the day, and even Drax. He looks like he's leaned down a lot, but he looks good. He looks healthy. He looks happy, and at the end of the day, that's good for him and good for his mental well-being. I'm all for it. That movie looks like a lot of fun as well. It's definitely going to be a turn your brain off and enjoy the action kind of film. I don't know how strong the plot in that one's going to be, but the action looks phenomenal in it.
Yes, have him reuniting with Pom Klomp from Guardians of the Galaxy, so she gets to play a role in that movie.
Looks like Terry Crews is in that film as well too, so that's got the potential to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to checking both. Yeah,
it could be a fun, campy, over the top type of action film to watch.
For sure.
Over on the streaming side, we have Uglies coming out on Netflix on September 13th. So you wouldn't be able to tell by the name, but that's kind of a sci-fi film that's about society now is. Well, I guess you can't be ugly in society anymore. So there's mandatory cosmetic surgery that you have to get done to basically exist in this world. But it looks like it turns into a search and rescue. Like she's trying to find her friends. So you've got Joey King, Laverne Cox, and Keith Powers in it. I really haven't seen anything on this. Like when I was looking up what was coming out this week, I saw it, but I've seen no trailer. I mean, a lot of stuff on Netflix, you may not see a lot of trailers and stuff before unless you're heavily in watching stuff, but it could be interesting, but I haven't seen a trailer. Just saw a description and saw that it's out. And like, all right, we'll see how it ends up turning out, but you can watch that on Netflix on September 13th.
Yeah, definitely one to potentially check out, but that is going to do it for this week's episode. We can't thank everyone enough for your continued support. Go to we'llbringthepopcorn.com for all of our social media stuff. If you like us on YouTube, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel so you're getting the episodes when they drop every Monday. If you're listening in the audio realm, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're on. I've been looking at some of the reviews, been a lot of positive stuff. Can't thank you enough for that. We have merch. If you go to our website, you can get the link to our merch store. Got some really cool shirts, some other really nice things for you to check out, and we'd appreciate your support there. But coming up next week, we are going to be reviewing the 5th episode of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power Season 2. And we're also really cool. I'm excited about this. We are getting an extra early advanced screening of Transformers 1, the new Transformers animated film, kind of computer graphic film. We get an advanced screening of that. I'm excited for it. We get to be reviewing it early, well before it comes out in theaters, because I think we're seeing it, a week and a half, 2 weeks before it's supposed to come out for everything in? Yeah, so excited for that, and we're going to be reviewing that coming up next week. We're excited for it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, for sure. So until next time, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next week.